In the middle of the journey that changed the course of my life, I remember very clearly that moment when I heard a voice that was so loud and clear that it was like thunder. "Come with me to the land I will show you. Leave your father and his house behind." I was born under the name Abram in the wealthy Chaldean city of Ur. The rivers Tigris and Euphrates make the land alive and prosperous. Growing up in a society with many gods, life in Ur was based on the seasons and had many practices for worshipping gods. The voice that called me offered more than just a new place to live. It also offered a spiritual and psychological change. "I will make your country great. People who bless you will be cursed, and people who curse you will be blessed. Everyone on earth will be blessed through you." I chose to follow these promises, which were as big as the night sky I meditated under. They led me to a big and impossible fate. What kind of man could accept such a call? At age 75, with little more than a growing faith and an unbreakable hope, I chose to take up God's task. Leaving Ur with my wife Sarai, my sister Lot, and everyone else we had gathered, we set out for Canaan, driven by the hope of a future set by God's care. The trip to Canaan was an epic adventure filled with the hope of achieving a prophesied fate. When we got there, we saw a beautiful rural landscape with rich hills and rivers. It was very different from the city life of Ur. However, this beautiful land was already settled by Canaanites. They lived in city-states with walls that kept them safe, and each one had its own king in charge. Canaan's fields were filled with vines and olive trees that went on forever. The sweet smell of figs filled the air. There was no denying how beautiful the land was, but the fact that there were other people there made it harder for the holy word to come true. The Lord spoke to me again in Shechem while Moreh was in charge. He reminded me of the promise that my descendants would receive this place. As a sign of my thanks, I built an altar there, designating it as a holy place for my promise to God. Next, I went west, between Bethel and Ai. There, I set up my tent and made another altar, calling on the Lord's name. Each altar I built was a sign of my faith and a rock when things were unsure. It didn't take long for the doubt to show up. The land I got because of a divine word was soon hit by a terrible famine, which put my faith, which I had just recently improved, to the test. "Why did you bring us here?" I looked up at the sky to try to figure it out. It wasn't easy to decide to go to Egypt, which is known for having lots of grain stores. Every step away from Canaan felt like breaking the promise. But the trip to Egypt wasn't just a way to get away from food. It was also a key step in strengthening my faith and protecting my family, because I was sure that God would never leave us. This movie about Abram's path of faith and persistence will inspire you. Please like it and subscribe to our channel to see more videos like this. Please share this movie so that everyone can learn about hope and courage. Feel free to leave a super thanks if this story moves you and you want to support this work. We can keep telling more Bible stories and spreading this message of faith and hope thanks to your donation. Thank you so much for your help. As the story of this amazing event is told again, after the reassuring word from God of protection and reward, I was in a very human problem when I got to Egypt. My wife Sarai's stunning beauty made me admire and desire her, which made me fear for my own life. With a dangerous plan, I asked her to act like she was my sister so that her assumed flexibility would keep me safe. Yes, when we got to Egypt, Sarai's beauty caught the eye of the Pharaoh's court, and she was taken to the house of the Pharaoh. I was treated differently many times, and I got money instead of everything everyone thought was my permission for Sarai's parade. They brought me bulls, cows, donkeys, slaves, and camels, which seemed like a sign of wealth, but was really a sign of deep strife and moral imbalance within the family. However, the holy eyes saw that this lie was unfair and didn't miss it. Because the Lord was so committed to keeping his word and doing what was right, he sent terrible disasters to Pharaoh's house. This quickly showed what was really going on between Sarai and me. The fight with Pharaoh was bound to happen. His questions not only showed that he was surprised and annoyed, but they also sent a moral message. Why did you let me marry her even though you said she was your sister? Here is your wife, Pharaoh. Take her and leave. We left Egypt with guards by our sides, carrying more than we had before. We also had a better and more complete understanding of who our God is, as a faithful defender, an unfailing guide, and a fair disciplinarian. When we got back to Canaan, we had more things, everything, and our faith was stronger because of the hard times we had been through. When we got to the Negev, Sarai, I, and everyone else with us, including Lot, saw that God's promises had come true in the form of a lot of money. Space became limited because there was so much livestock, silver, and gold. This made things tense between Lot's herders and mine. It was clear that, even though we were lucky, we were at a point where we had to make a big choice. To keep the peace and keep the family together, I told Lot that we should go in different ways so that we could both do well without any problems. Lot decided to live near Sodom because the Jordan Valley was so fertile, but I stayed in the land of Canaan. The separation was real, but it was also a sign of different moral decisions. The Lord talked to me again after Lot left. He told me again in a vision that included everything that my offspring would be as many and blessed as the dust on the earth. I was shown the vastness of the earth that went beyond what I could see. This made me even more sure that the land of Canaan would always be home for my family. With each step I took in this promised land, my faith became more connected to the divine plan for my life. This sealed an endless bond between heaven and earth, between God and the people, that would last for thousands of years. I got a new word from the Lord after being split up from Lot, and before seeing how big the land of Canaan was. If you raise your eyes and look north, south, east, and west from where you are, I will give all the land you see to you and your children forever. This promise was as big as the sky it covered. It was going to change not only my life, but also the lives of everyone who would come after me. I traveled all over the earth because of this divine vision. I knew that every step I took was an act of trust in the promise of an eternal heritage. Finally, I chose to live by the oak of Mamre in Hebron. I picked this spot not only because it was beautiful, but also because it had spiritual meaning for me. I built a new altar to the Lord there as a sign of my thanks and continued dedication to the promise that was made. It was a place of prayer and a direct connection with God. In the middle of life's challenges, it was a place where people could renew their faith. On a very hot day, I was resting at the opening to my tent under the shade of the Mamre trees when I saw 3 guys off in the distance. I ran to meet them, bowed before them, and offered them rest and food out of a sense of warmth and respect. "My lord, if you like me, please don't walk right by your helper without stopping. I'll get you some water and wash your feet. Feel better by taking a break under this tree while I make you some bread. Then you can continue your journey." The men agreed, and I quickly got the food ready. Sarah is told to make fine flour cakes, and I choose a tender and delicious ox to cook myself. When the food was ready, I served them in the nice shade and watched them eat, still not getting how important the meeting was. At that moment, one of the guests, whose presence seemed to be filled with divine power, revealed something very shocking. He said he would come back the next year and that Sarah would have a son, even though it didn't look likely. When Sarah, who was hiding at the front of the store, heard this promise, she laughed to herself, shocked at how old we were. When the guests saw how she was acting, they asked, "Why was Sarah laughing? Is there anything the Lord can't do? I will come back to you at the right time. and Sarah will have a son." Sarah, who was scared, said she didn't laugh, but the guest pressed. "Yes, you are amused. This moment not only confirmed the promise made years ago, but it also made clear that our relationship with God is direct and personal." Before the guys left for Sodom, I thought about how deep and wide the words were. Even though it seemed unlikely, keeping the divine covenant would lead to a fullness that went beyond human limits. The promise of a son, which is a sign of continuity and blessing, reinforced this. With high hopes and restored faith, my heart was getting ready for the difficulties and miracles that lay ahead on the way to fulfilling the promised fate. Before a disaster that might happen soon over Sodom and Gomorrah, I had to make a spiritual choice that would affect many people's lives. During our conversation, the Lord asked me if He should keep His plans secret, since I was going to be the leader of a great and blessed country and teach my children and grandchildren about justice and fairness. With a strong sense of what was right, I made a passionate plea to the Lord, asking if it was fair to punish both good and bad people. Along with the guilty, you will destroy the good people. If there are 50 good people in the city, you will also destroy it. The Lord's answer showed how merciful He is. For 50 good people, He would spare the city. Not pleased and moved by an even greater concern for human life, I kept going, lowering the number of good people who were needed to stop the harm until I reached 10. Because the Lord is so kind, He decided to spare the towns as long as at least 10 good people were found. That night, when the angels got to Sodom, they saw my nephew Lot sitting at the city gate. They were greeted with respect and reverence, and he made them bow to the ground and demanded that they stay with him out of the dangers of the public area. They weren't sure at first, but they agreed to go with Lot to his house, where he served them a simple but masterfully made meal. Soon after, men from all over Sodom surrounded the house and ordered that Lot hand over the guests so they could carry out their violent plans. Being deeply committed to keeping his guests safe, Lot gave up his own girls so that the angels could stay safe. This act of desperation showed how far he was willing to go morally to protect his guests, but the men refused and made their threats stronger. When things were getting worse, the angels stepped in and brought Lot into the house. They also blinded the attackers so they couldn't find the door. While they were temporarily safe, they told Lot the real reason for their visit. The city was going to be destroyed soon because it was so evil. While the angels told Lot to quickly grab his family and run away, Lot's future sons-in-law didn't believe them. At dawn, because Lot wasn't sure what to do, angels grabbed him, his wife, and their girls and led them out of the city, telling them not to look back and to go to safety in the mountains. But Lot was afraid of the trip to the mountains, so he begged to be let escape to Zoar, a smaller city. The angels said yes, so he and his family could stay there. As dawn got closer and Lot went into Zoar, the sky over Sodom and Gomorrah was filled with the fire of God's punishment, sulfur rain, and flames that burned everything down. When Lot's wife ignored the order not to look back, she was turned into a pillar of salt to show people what happens when they don't follow the rules. When he went back to the spot where he had prayed to the Lord, he was terrified to see smoke rising from where Sodom and Gomorrah used to be. It was like seeing the sour side of divine justice for the first time. It made the world even more complicated, since justice often costs a lot. It was easy to understand. It was important to obey and believe in God's instructions, not only to stay alive, but also to pass on the heritage that I and my children and grandchildren were to carry on. Following the ruin of Sodom and Gomorrah, I was forced to think about how bad sin is and how important it is to follow God's rules. These lessons stayed with me when I moved to the Negev area, which is between Kadesh and Shur, and then to Gerar. But in Gerar, I had to think about my safety again because of Sarah's beauty, which had already put my life in danger before. So I used the same trick I had in Egypt and told Sarah she was my sister instead of my wife. Abimelech, the king of Gerar, was interested in Sarah and ordered that she be taken to his castle. Thankfully, God saved us from what could have been a very bad result. God showed up to Abimelech in a dream and told him that getting connected with Sarah would be a big mistake. To calm down, Abimelech said that he wasn't guilty and that the information Sarah and I gave him had tricked him. God knew Abimelech was telling the truth when he told him to return Sarah. He also told me that as a messenger, I should pray for him to escape the death that could come from this mistake. The next day, an angry Abimelech called me to explain what I had done. I told him that I was acting the way I was because I was afraid that God's fear did not rule in Gerar and that my life was in danger. In addition, I told him I hadn't lied at all because Sarah was my sister and my wife. This truth had kept us safe on our trips. As a sign of respect and restitution, Abimelech not only gave Sarah back to us, but he also offered us sheep, horses, and male and female slaves as payment. Additionally, he let us pick where to live in his land and presented Sarah with 1,000 silver pieces as a way to repair her honor. After taking care of these issues, I followed God's order and prayed with God for Abimelech so that the punishment of making the women in his family sterile would be eased. God heard my prayer, and the women of Abimelech's house got better. This kept the king's life and family alive. During all of these terrible events, God kept his word in a very special way. Sarah got pregnant with me and gave birth to a son, even though I am 100 years old. The birth of Isaac was a very happy time, and it was clear that God had kept his promises. I did what God told me to do and circumcised Isaac on the 8th day, marking him in line with the promise we made with God. The events that happened to me not only increased my faith, but they also made me realize how important it is to follow God's rules. God's power, justice, and kindness are shown to me through Isaac's life, who was born in an amazing way, and through Gerard's successes. With each step and choice, I felt more determined to follow the road God had set out for me and my children and grandchildren. I knew that everything I did would have an effect on future generations. Being able to see Isaac made Sarah so happy, which was proof that God was loyal. God has given me a reason to laugh, she said, and everyone who knew our story could see how happy she was. Family and friends came together for Isaac's party, which was a big feast that marked the start of a new era in our lives. But along with the waves of happiness, waves of stress came up that would test how strong our faith and family were. Sarah was always watching, and she saw Ishmael playing with Isaac. Ishmael is the son of Hagar the Egyptian and my eldest child. The scene, which would have made many people happy, made Sarah very afraid about how the fortune would be shared in the future. She asked me to get rid of Hagar and Ishmael, which was a hard request. This request made me sad because Ishmael was my son, and I didn't want to treat him badly because it felt like betraying my own blood. But in the middle of my pain, God stepped in and told me that the road Sarah suggested was important for his plans to come true. Don't worry about the boy or his servant. Do what Sarah tells you, because your children will be known through Isaac. But I will also make a great nation out of Ishmael, since he is your relative. Even though my heart was sad, I felt better as I got Hagar and Ishmael ready to leave. I gave them food and water for the desert and said goodbye at dawn. Because he was kind, God did not leave Ishmael. When Hagar was worried that her son Ishmael wouldn't make it through the desert, God stepped in and opened her eyes to a spring of water. He also told her that Ishmael would have a great future and become a skilled archer, and that his offspring would also build a great country. At the same time, my friendship with Abimelech, the king of Gerar, got stronger and more respectful. Because he and Pikol, the leader of his army, saw that God had blessed my life. They tried to make our union stronger by taking an oath of loyalty. But there was a fight over a well that one of Abimelech's slaves had taken. Even though there were problems, we were able to come to an understanding peacefully. To celebrate our union, we took an oath in Beersheba, which became known as the Well of the Oath. These important events led up to one of the hardest tests of my faith. When I was quiet, God called me out loud, and I answered right away. I'm here. What came next was the scariest order ever. Along with your beloved son Isaac, take him to the area around Moriah. He should be burned as an offering on one of the hills I will show you. The words cut through me like thunder, shaking me to my core. But because of a faith that had helped me through many hard times, I got up early the next morning. I got my donkey ready and my beloved son Isaac, 2 workers, and I set out on our journey. I saw the place from afar after 3 days of traveling. They were taking care of the donkey, so I told them, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there to worship, and then we'll come back to you." When I got to the right place, I arranged the wood for an altar while my hands were shaking. Then, with a broken heart, I tied Isaac up and put him on the altar. Every move was a test of complete obedience, a complete giving up of my own will to God's. They all helped me get ready for the sacrifice that would define my faith and obedience. At the most important moment, when my heart was heavy and I was ready to take the knife and kill my beloved son Isaac, a voice from heaven broke the silence with such urgency that time stopped. "Abram, Abram." I quickly replied, "Here I am." And the angel of the Lord, who seemed both powerful and caring, told me clearly not to hurt the boy. The harsh test turned out to be a test of my faith and fear of God. It showed that I would not pause to obey, even if it meant dying. When I turned around, I saw a ram stuck in a bush by its horns. I quickly grabbed the animal and burned it instead of Isaac as a gift. This place, which I named "The Lord Will Provide," became a permanent reminder of God's provision. It was a place where faith met divine wonder, and I felt so grateful and relieved. This experience changed how I understood how faithful God is. When the angel of the Lord spoke to me again from heaven, he made even bigger promises to me. He promised me that they would have many children who would increase and take over their enemies' gates. He also said that all the countries of the world would be blessed through them, which would repay my obedience. With a heart full of relief and joy, I went back to where our slaves were waiting with Isaac. We went back to Beersheba together, and I continued to live and think about the lessons God had taught me about faith and loyalty. Soon after, I had to deal with the sadness of Sarah's death. She had lived to be 127 years old. When you left, I felt a hole in my heart that could only be filled by memories of our love and the hope that we will meet again someday. When she died in Kyrie Ataba, which is now called Hebron, I talked with the sons of Heth about buying a field that had the cave of Machpelah in it. It was important to me to have a proper place to put my beloved wife and to build a family tomb for future generations. As the deal came to an end in front of the community leaders, I buried Sarah, making that spot a holy place of remembering and family continuity. Buying the field of Machpelah wasn't just a business deal, it was also an act of faith in God's eternal promise of a property for my children and grandchildren. After Sarah died, Keturah brought new meaning and friendship into my life. We had more children together, making the big family that God had given me even bigger. Each child was a lesson of how faithful God is and how He promised to keep giving us. Life was full of difficulties and miracles for me, and every moment was shaped by my connection with God and my promise to follow His rules. When my time was up, I died peacefully, happy with the life I had lived. Isaac and Ishmael buried me in the cave of Machpelah, which I had chosen as my final resting place. This story, which I am now passing on, is a proof of faith, trials, and victory. It should encourage others to believe God and follow His ways, just like I did, believing that they will be blessed forever and that the Lord will always provide. We want you to think about the promises you have made and kept in your own life as we talk about Abram's. How can you show that you believe the things that people have promised you? Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your story. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to see more brave and moving stories of faith and hope. Thank you for following us to the end of this incredible story. See you in the next video. May God be with you always. Amen.